The moon hung silent in the darkness of space, its gray surface untouched by anything except ancient craters and cosmic dust. Then, without warning, a streak of fire cut across the black sky. The alien vessel tumbled through the void, trailing sparks and debris. Its hull glowed red-hot as it crashed into the lunar surface, carving a deep scar across the ancient rock. Inside the wreckage, 3 alien beings struggled to survive. Their distress beacon pulsing weakly into the vastness of space, Admiral Jiho sat in the command center on Earth, watching the data streams with narrowed eyes. He was a man in his late 50s, his hair streaked with gray, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. For 20 years he had argued that humanity needed to look beyond Earth to prepare for what might exist among the stars. Most people had called him paranoid. Now, as the sensors picked up the crash on the moon, he allowed himself a grim smile. He had been right to worry. The admiral turned to his second-in-command, K, a tall man named Tai Yang, who had served with him for over a decade. "Get me Captain Dayon. Tell her to prepare her squadron for immediate launch. We're going to the moon within hours." 3 experimental spacecraft lifted off from Earth's hidden military base. They were sleek vessels, built in secret over the past 5 years, designed for deep space combat that everyone hoped would never come. Captain Dayon commanded the lead ship from her chair, her fingers dancing across the controls. She was young for such responsibility, barely 30 years old, but she had proven herself again and again in simulations. This would be her first real mission. As the human ships approached the crash site, they found the alien vessel half buried in lunar dust. It was unlike anything in Earth's databases, built with materials and designs that seemed to defy conventional physics. Dayon ordered her team to proceed with caution. They had no idea if the beings inside were friendly or hostile, live or dead. Dr. Heron waited in the second ship, her equipment ready. She was a xenolinguist, though until today her entire career had been theoretical. She had spent years studying the possibility of alien contact, developing protocols and translation algorithms. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared to put all that training to use. This moment would define the rest of human history. The boarding team entered the wreckage carefully, their suits sealed against the vacuum. They found the aliens huddled in what remained of their control room, injured but alive. The creatures were taller than humans, with skin that shimmered like oil on water and large eyes that reflected the light from the rescue team's equipment. When they saw the humans, they recoiled in fear, making sounds that the translation software struggled to interpret. Hiron worked quickly, running the alien sounds through her programs, adjusting parameters, searching for patterns. After 20 agonizing minutes, she began to understand fragments. The aliens were terrified. They thought the humans would kill them. She activated her speaker and began to respond, using simple concepts, trying to convey peace and help. Slowly, gradually, the aliens began to understand. The lead alien, who Hiron came to think of as the captain, explained through broken translation that they were from a place called the Galactic Concordat. They had been surveying this sector of space when their ship's systems failed. They were grateful for the rescue, but worried. Their distress beacon was still active, and others would come. Some of those others would not be friendly. Admiral Jiho received this news with concern. He ordered the alien ship's beacon shut down, but it was too late. Already, his sensors were picking up new contacts approaching from deep space. These ships moved with hostile intent, their weapons charging as they accelerated toward the moon. The raiders arrived in force. 12 vessels against Earth's 3 experimental ships. They were part of a group the alien captain called the Marauder Swarm, pirates who scavenged technology from crash sites and attacked weak targets. They saw the alien wreckage as a prize, and the human ships as minor obstacles to be swept aside. Captain Dayon watched the enemy ships approach on her displays. Her training had prepared her for this moment, but training and reality were vastly different things. These were real ships with real weapons, piloted by beings who would kill her and her crew without hesitation. She took a deep breath and opened a channel to her squadron. "All ships, this is Dayon. We hold this position. We protect those aliens. We show these raiders that humans do not run." The battle began with the raiders firing first, beams of energy that cut through space toward the human vessels. Dayon ordered evasive maneuvers, and her ship twisted away from the attack with surprising agility. The human ships were smaller than the raiders, built for speed and maneuverability rather than heavy armor. They darted between the larger enemy vessels, firing their railguns in precise bursts. The raiders had expected an easy fight. They were surprised when human weapons punched through their shields. When human ships moved in patterns they could not predict, Captain Dayon fought like she was playing chess at light speed, anticipating enemy movements. Positioning her ships where they could do the most damage while taking the least fire, Commander Taiyang, monitoring the battle from Earth, fed tactical data to Dayon's squadron in real time. He identified weak points in enemy formations, suggested attack vectors, coordinated the 3 human ships into a fighting unit that was greater than the sum of its parts. The raiders grew frustrated as their numerical advantage seemed to mean nothing against these strange, aggressive tactics. One raider ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, then another. The remaining raiders began to pull back, reassessing the threat. In that moment of hesitation, Dayan pressed her advantage. Her squadron surged forward, weapons blazing, driving the enemy away from the moon. The raiders broke formation and fled, but not before their lead ship transmitted a burst of data into deep space. Information about Earth and its unexpected military capabilities. When the battle ended, Captain Dayon's hands were shaking. Her ship had taken damage, and one of her crew was injured, but they had one. They had protected the aliens and driven off a superior force. Admiral Jaho's voice came over the communication channel, calm and proud. "Well done, Captain. Bring our guests home. Humanity has just announced itself to the galaxy." The rescued aliens watched the humans with new eyes. Their initial fear had transformed into respect and confusion. These beings from this isolated world had fought with skill and courage that rivaled the greatest warriors in the Concordat. The alien captain made a decision. When they returned home, he would tell his government everything about humanity. The galaxy needed to know that Earth was not to be underestimated. As the human ships carried the aliens back to Earth, Dr. Hiron continued her conversations with them, learning about the vast civilizations that existed beyond humanity's knowledge. She learned about the Concordat, about its laws and its powers, about the thousands of worlds that had never heard of Earth. The universe was so much larger than she had imagined. And humanity was about to take its first steps into that immense arena, Admiral. Giho stood before the alien ship as it landed on Earth. He knew that everything was about to change. The quiet days of isolation were over. Humanity would now face a galaxy that might welcome them, or might see them as a threat. Either way, there was no going back. The emergence had begun. The journey to the nearest Concordat outpost took 3 weeks. Admiral Jaho traveled aboard the repaired alien vessel, accompanied by Dr. Hiron and a new member of the delegation, Envoy Sumin. Sumin was Earth's most experienced diplomat, a woman who had spent her career negotiating peace between nations on Earth. Now, she faced the greatest negotiation in human history. She spent the journey learning everything she could about galactic politics. Culture and law, Engineer Minho came along as well. A young man barely 25 years old but already recognized as a genius in spacecraft design. He carried with him data files showcasing human technological achievements, hoping to demonstrate that Earth had something valuable to offer the galaxy. His enthusiasm was infectious, though Hiron worried it might not be enough to overcome the prejudices they would face. The Concordat outpost appeared on their sensors like a small moon, a massive structure that housed thousands of beings from dozens of different species. Ships of all shapes and sizes docked at its ports, trading goods and information. The rescued alien captain, who had introduced himself through translation as a being whose name approximated to Kelvin, guided them through the docking procedures. He had grown fond of the humans during their journey together and genuinely hoped that Concordat would accept them. When they entered the outpost, the humans experienced culture shock on a scale they had never imagined. Aliens of every description moved through the corridors, speaking languages that ranged from musical tones to complex clicking sounds. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others on 4 or 6, or none at all. Some breathed oxygen, Others required different atmospheres and wore environmental suits. The diversity was overwhelming. Hiren recorded everything, her mind racing to categorize and understand the species they encountered. She noticed how some aliens stared at the humans with curiosity, while others seemed to dismiss them with a glance. The humans were clearly unusual here, perhaps even primitive by local standards. It made her anxious about how the formal meeting would proceed. The Concordat Council met in a vast chamber at the heart of the outpost. Representatives from 7 major civilizations sat in a circle, each one radiating authority and power. The chamber's technology translated all speech simultaneously, allowing everyone to understand each other regardless of their native language. Admiral Jiho stood at the center, flanked by Hiren and Sumin. With Minho slightly behind them, Envoy Sumin began the presentation. She spoke clearly and confidently, explaining humanity's desire to join the galactic community as equals. She described Earth's achievements in science, art, and culture. She emphasized humanity's capacity for cooperation and growth. She made the case that Earth could be a valuable addition to the Concordat, bringing fresh perspectives and dedication to the common good. The council listened in silence. When Sumin finished, there was a long pause. Then the questions began. A tall insectoid being asked about Earth's history of warfare. Sumin answered honestly, acknowledging humanity's violent past, but emphasizing recent progress toward global peace. A floating jellyfish-like creature inquired about Earth's technological level. Minho stepped forward to present human innovations, explaining the principles behind their fusion drives and weapon systems. The response from the council was not encouraging. One representative laughed openly at Minho's presentation, calling human technology charmingly primitive. Another dismissed Earth's fusion reactors as outdated by several thousand years. The most hostile response came from the Velion Empire's representative, a being called the Primarch, who looked vaguely humanoid, but stood nearly 3 meters tall, with skin like polished stone. The Primarch's voice boomed through the chamber. This council has observed Earth for over 500 of your years. We have watched you wage countless wars against yourselves. We have seen you destroy your own environment, oppress your own people, and elevate violence to an art form. You celebrate warriors and conquerors in your histories. You teach your children to fight before you teach them to think. And now you come before us having barely left your own planet, demanding to be treated as equals? Admiral Jiho bristled at the accusation but remained silent. This was Sumin's moment to respond. She began to speak about humanity's capacity for change, but the Primarch cut her off. You have nothing we need or want. Your technology is primitive. Your culture is barbaric. Your presence in this galaxy would be, at best, an embarrassment to the Concordat, and, at worst, a threat to the peace we have maintained for 2 millennia. Other council members nodded in agreement. A few seemed sympathetic to Earth's petition but remained silent in the face of the Primarch's passionate opposition. The vote, when it came, was overwhelming. 11-1 against accepting humanity into the Concordat. Only Kelvin's government voted in favor, citing humanity's bravery in defending their crew. The rejection stung, but worse was yet to come. The council issued a formal decree. Earth was to remain confined to its own solar system. Any human vessel found beyond the orbit of Pluto would be considered a violation of Concordat space and would be subject to quarantine enforcement, which meant destruction. Humanity was to remain isolated until such time as the Council deemed them civilized enough for contact. A determination that might take centuries or millennia. Kelvin spoke up, his translated voice urgent and concerned. With respect, counselors, I must warn you not to underestimate these humans. I witnessed their combat capabilities firsthand. They defeated a marauder force that outnumbered them 4-1. Their tactics were unlike anything in our databases. Their weapons penetrated shields we thought were impenetrable. If you treat them as primitives to be contained, you may come to regret it. The Primarch waved dismissively. We have seen the data from that engagement. The Marauders are undisciplined raiders, not a true military force. The humans prevailed through luck and desperation, nothing more. This council's decision stands. The hearing is concluded. The human delegation returned to their ship in silence. Sumin looked defeated, her carefully prepared arguments dismissed without real consideration. Minho stared at his datapad, his innovations mocked and belittled. Dr. Heron felt anger building in her chest. A cold fury at the arrogance and condescension they had faced. Only Admiral Ji-ho seemed calm. He gathered his team in the ship's meeting room as they prepared to depart. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "What happened today was not a failure. It was a revelation. We now know exactly where we stand. The galaxy sees us as primitive and violent. They fear what we might become, so they seek to keep us contained. They have made their choice, and now we must make ours." Sumin looked up at him. "What choice is that, Admiral?" Ji-ho leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We can accept their judgment and remain confined to our solar system for generations, waiting for permission that may never come. Or we can show them that humanity does not ask for permission. We take our place in the galaxy through our own strength. We build a fleet so powerful that they cannot dismiss us. We prove beyond any doubt that we are not primitives to be contained, but equals to be respected." The journey back to Earth was very different from the journey out. The delegation discussed plans and possibilities, their initial disappointment transforming into determination. Minho began sketching designs for new ships, incorporating what he had learned from observing Concordat technology. Hiron started drafting protocols for potential future conflicts. Sumin prepared her report for Earth's governance, already anticipating the political challenges ahead. When they arrived home, the news of the rejection spread quickly. Public reaction was intense. Some people argued for acceptance of the Council's decision, counseling patience, and continued attempts at diplomacy. But the majority felt something different: anger, pride, a fierce determination not to be caged like animals in a zoo. Earth's governments convened an emergency summit. Admiral Ji-ho was invited to present his proposal. He stood before the leaders of every nation and laid out his vision: a united Earth, a massive construction project, a warfleet that would force the galaxy to acknowledge humanity's strength. It would require resources on an unprecedented scale, cooperation between nations that had been enemies, and years of dedicated effort. The debate lasted for days. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would build its fleet. The Concordat had dismissed them, confined them, belittled them. Now, Earth would show the galaxy what humans could achieve when they were united by a common purpose. The age of isolation was ending, and the age of emergence was beginning. Whether the galaxy liked it or not, the transformation of humanity began quietly but moved with stunning speed. Within 6 months of the Concordat's rejection, every major nation on Earth had committed resources to the fleet initiative. Factories that once built cars and consumer goods retooled to manufacture spacecraft components. Universities redirected their research toward advanced propulsion and weapons systems. The world's brightest minds, regardless of nationality, gathered at newly constructed facilities to solve problems that had seemed impossible just months before. Admiral Yuna took command of the construction effort. She was a logistics expert who had spent 20 years managing complex military supply chains. Now she faced a challenge that dwarfed anything in history: building a warfleet from scratch while creating the infrastructure to support it. She established her headquarters on Mars, where the thin atmosphere and lower gravity made large-scale construction more efficient than on Earth. The asteroid belt became humanity's primary resource zone. Mining operations extracted metals and minerals on an industrial scale. Enormous processing facilities refined raw materials into the alloys needed for spacecraft hulls. Transport ships hauled supplies back and forth in an endless stream, creating trade routes that had never existed before. It was capitalism and communism and every system in between, working together toward a single goal: engineer. Minho led the design teams with infectious enthusiasm. He had studied every scrap of data from the Concordat encounter, every sensor reading from the battle with the Marauders. He understood that humanity could not simply copy alien technology. Earth's industrial base was different, its materials science was different, and most importantly, its approach to warfare was different. Minho designed ships that played to human strengths, rather than mimicking alien designs. The first prototypes emerged from the Martian shipyards after 8 months of intensive work. They were ugly compared to the elegant Concordat vessels. Blunt and functional with modular designs that allowed rapid repairs and upgrades. But when Minho ran the simulations, the results were promising. These ships could take damage that would cripple an alien vessel and keep fighting. They could be reconfigured for different mission types in a matter of hours. They were, in every sense, warships built by a species that understood war. Dr. Seogen arrived at the weapons development facility with a reputation as Earth's most brilliant theoretical physicist. She had spent her career studying exotic particles and energy states that existed only in laboratory conditions. Now, she had unlimited funding and a clear mission: create weapons that could threaten the advanced civilizations of the Concordat. She approached the problem with scientific rigor and creative thinking. Her breakthrough came when studying the data from the Marauder battle. The alien shields had failed in unexpected ways when hit by human railgun rounds. Seogen realized that Concordat shield technology, which had remained largely unchanged for thousands of years, had a fundamental flaw. It was optimized to deflect energy weapons, but was vulnerable to high-velocity kinetic impacts at specific frequencies. She began developing the Shattered Torpedo, a weapon that would exploit this weakness with devastating effect, Captain. Dayon found herself promoted to Commodore and given a new responsibility: training the first generation of Warfleet commanders. She established the Strategic Combat Academy in Earth's orbit, where aspiring officers learned to think like human warriors rather than Concordat peacekeepers. The curriculum focused on aggressive tactics, rapid adaptation, and unconventional thinking. Dayon taught her students that rules were guidelines, that the enemy's expectations were vulnerabilities, and that victory belonged to those who were willing to risk everything. Commander Taiyang worked alongside Dayon, developing tactical doctrines that would define human space combat. He studied military history from every human culture, finding principles that transcended time and technology: surprise, deception, concentration of force, maneuver warfare. All these concepts were integrated into the training program. The Concordat had forgotten these lessons during millennia of peace. Humanity would use that complacency against them if necessary. Colonel Juan commanded the Stellar Marines, a new branch of military service dedicated to combat in space and on hostile worlds. She trained her forces in boarding actions, ship-to-ship assault, and zero-gravity combat. These were skills that the peaceful Concordat had deemed obsolete. But Juan understood that sometimes the only way to win was to put soldiers on the enemy's deck. Her Marines practiced relentlessly, becoming experts in close quarters. Battle in environments that would kill most humans in seconds. The construction effort accelerated as Earth's industries hit their stride. Shipyards multiplied across the solar system. On Mars, in the asteroid belt, in orbit around Jupiter's moons, the sound of construction never stopped. Massive dreadnoughts took shape alongside smaller destroyers and frigates. Each ship was tested rigorously, pushed to its limits and beyond, then redesigned to address any weaknesses. Minho's teams iterated constantly, each generation of ships better than the last. 3 years after the Concordat's rejection, the fleet began to take its final form. 500 warships of various classes, organized into tactical battle groups. 20 dreadnoughts served as the core of the fleet's offensive power, each one carrying enough firepower to threaten an entire alien battle group. The flagship, christened Indomitable at Admiral Jaho's insistence, was a monument to human determination. It stretched over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and armored with alloys that could withstand punishment that would vaporize lesser vessels. Admiral Jiho assumed command of the Indomitable with pride and trepidation. He walked through its corridors, met its crew, studied its systems. The ship was everything he had hoped for and more. But he knew that steel and weapons alone would not be enough. The fleet needed a purpose, a mission to prove itself. That mission came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements near the edge of human space. The Marauder swarm was gathering, emboldened by the Concordat's indifference and drawn by rumors of Earth's wealth and technology. Intelligence estimates put their numbers at over 1,000 ships, the largest raider force assembled in decades. They were coming to plunder humanity's colonies and capture the technology of the Warfleet. The Concordat, true to their policy of non-interference, refused to help defend a non-member species. Jiho convened his senior officers aboard the Indomitable: Commodore Daeon, Commander Taiyang, Colonel Giwan, Admiral Yuna, and the others gathered around the holographic display showing the approaching threat. The mood was tense, but not fearful. They had spent 3 years preparing for exactly this kind of conflict. "This is what we built the fleet for," Jiho said quietly. "Not to conquer or to seek revenge against the Concordat, but to defend ourselves against a galaxy that sees us as prey. The Marauders think we are weak and isolated. They believe our defenses will crumble before their numbers. We are going to teach them a lesson that will echo across every world in the Concordat. We are going to show them what it means to attack humanity." The fleet mobilized with efficiency that surprised even its own commanders. Ships that had never flown together in combat moved into formation like they had been doing it for years. Crews took their positions with calm professionalism. Every system was checked and double-checked. Admiral Yuna's logistics teams ensured that. Ammunition and supplies were distributed perfectly. Dr. Seojin's weapons were loaded and armed. Colonel Jiwan's Marines prepared their equipment for potential boarding actions as the human Warfleet moved out to meet the invaders. Jiho stood on the Indomitable's bridge and felt a strange sense of calm. Everything had led to this moment. All the planning, all the construction, all the training would now be tested in the fire of real combat. He thought about the Concordat Council and their dismissive words, about the Primarch's certainty that humans were primitive and barbaric. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn the truth. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was dangerous. Anyone who forgot that would pay a terrible price. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth behind and heading toward its first true battle. The galaxy was about to shake. The Marauders' swarm arrived at the outer human colonies like a plague of locusts. Over 1,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace near the mining settlements on the edge of explored space. The Raider Warlord, a creature whose species valued only strength and plunder, broadcast a simple message to the human colonists: surrender everything or die. He expected immediate compliance. Instead, he received silence. The colonists had been evacuated days earlier. Admiral Jiho had seen the Marauders coming and refused to risk civilian lives. The mining stations stood empty, automated defenses active but deliberately limited in strength. The raiders attacked with overwhelming force, obliterating the stations and claiming their first easy victory. They celebrated and grew confident, certain that the rest of the human territory would fall just as easily. Jiho watched the attack from his command center aboard the Indomitable. He felt no anger at the destruction of the stations. They were replaceable, and their sacrifice served a greater purpose. The Marauders were committing themselves to a course of action, pushing deeper into human space, spreading their forces across multiple targets. They were doing exactly what he wanted them to do. Commodore Daeon commanded the first response force, a battle group of 30 destroyers and frigates. Her orders were not to win, but to delay and harass. She struck the Marauder fleet in hit-and-run attacks, appearing suddenly from behind asteroids or planetary rings, firing a devastating volley, then disappearing before the enemy could respond effectively. Her ships used their superior maneuverability to frustrate the raiders, damaging their vessels without committing to a decisive engagement. The Marauder warlord grew angry at these tactics. He split his fleet into smaller groups to chase down the human ships, to corner them and destroy them. This was exactly what Daeon wanted. She led the raiders deeper into the system, stretching their formations thin, isolating their battle groups from each other. Commander Taiyang tracked every enemy movement from the tactical center, feeding real-time data to Daeon and calculating the perfect moment to spring the trap. Meanwhile, Commander Hannah operated in the shadows with her stealth destroyer, Shadow's Edge. Her ship used experimental coding technology that made it nearly invisible to alien sensors. She positioned herself near the Marauder communication relays, studying their signal patterns, preparing for the moment when she would cut the enemy's ability to coordinate. Hannah was patient and meticulous. waiting for the perfect opportunity. The marauders pushed toward the inner colonies. Growing more aggressive as they penetrated deeper into human space, they believed they were winning, that the human forces were retreating in disarray. The warlord broadcast taunts toward Earth, promising to enslave the population and strip the planet of all valuable resources. He had no idea that he was being led into the most sophisticated military trap in human history. The trap was centered on the Helios Gate, a strategic choke point near a binary star system. The local gravity and radiation created natural cover that human ships would exploit, but that would confuse the Marauders' sensors. Admiral Jeho positioned his main fleet here, hidden among asteroid fields and using the star's radiation to mask their energy signatures. 500 warships waited in absolute silence, crews at battle stations, weapons charged and ready. Commodore Dayon led the Marauder fleet directly toward the ambush point. Her battle group was battered and showing signs of damage, exactly as planned. The raiders pursued aggressively, certain that final victory was within reach. The warlord commanded his entire fleet to converge on Dayon's position, to overwhelm the humans with pure numbers and end this irritating resistance. The moment the Marauder fleet entered the Helios Gate, Commander Hannah activated her ship's jamming systems. The Shadow's Edge broadcast powerful interference across all Concordat standard communication frequencies. Suddenly, the raider ships found themselves unable to talk to each other, unable to coordinate their movements, isolated and confused. Then the human Warfleet revealed itself. Hundreds of ships emerged from hiding, surrounding the Marauders on all sides. The trap had been perfect. The raiders were caught in a kill zone with no way to escape and no way to organize a coherent defense. Admiral Jeho's voice carried across all human ships with a single word: fire. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Human ships attacked with coordinated precision that bordered on telepathic. Every shot was calculated, every movement purposeful. The dreadnoughts unleashed their main batteries, its massive railguns that fired projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. These rounds punched through Marauder shields like they were made of paper. The kinetic energy alone enough to tear ships apart, Dr. Seogen's shatter. Torpedoes proved even more devastating than the simulations had predicted. When they impacted Marauder shields, they created a cascading resonance effect that caused the entire defensive field to collapse. Without shields, the raider ships were vulnerable to conventional weapons. The combination was lethal. Torpedo strike, shield collapse, railgun barrage, ship destroyed. The sequence repeated across the battlefield hundreds of times. Lieutenant Kuhn led his fighter squadron in a daring assault on the Marauder flagship. His pilots were young and had never seen real combat before, but their training took over. They wove through defensive fire with practiced skill, targeting the massive ship's engine systems. Kuhn himself made the final approach, firing a sustained burst from his fighter's cannons directly into the flagship's reactor cooling system. The resulting explosion crippled the enemy command ship. Leaving it dead in space, the Marauders attempted to fight back. But their weapons were designed for raiding and overwhelming weaker targets, not for fighting a prepared military force. Their energy beams splashed harmlessly against human shields. Their missiles were intercepted by point defense systems. Their attempts at coordinated maneuvers failed because they still could not communicate effectively. Thanks to Hannah's continued jamming, Colonel Ji-Wan saw her opportunity when several Marauder ships were disabled but not destroyed. She launched her Marines in boarding pods, small armored craft that attached to enemy hulls and cut through. This was a tactic the raiders had never encountered. By the time they realized what was happening, Ji-Wan's forces were already inside their ships, fighting their way toward critical systems. The Marines moved through the alien vessels with brutal efficiency, capturing control rooms and engineering sections, turning the raiders' own ships against them. The battle lasted 18 hours. It was a sustained, methodical destruction of the Marauder swarm. Human ships rotated in and out of combat, fresh vessels replacing damaged ones in a carefully orchestrated dance of warfare. Admiral Jeho commanded from the Indomitable's bridge, his eyes tracking dozens of engagements simultaneously, making split-second decisions that determined the fate of thousands, When it finally ended, the statistics were staggering. Of the 1,000 Marauder ships that had entered human space, fewer than 50 escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured. The human fleet suffered losses 237, ships damaged beyond immediate repair. 1,200 casualties, but these numbers were minuscule compared to the enemy's devastation. It was not just a victory, it was an annihilation. Admiral Jeho surveyed the battlefield from his command chair. Debris floated in clouds around the Helios Gate, the remnants of the Marauder fleet. His own ships were regrouping, damage control teams working on vessels that had taken hits. The crew of the Indomitable looked exhausted but proud. They had done something remarkable, something that would change everything. GHO opened a communication channel that broadcast across all Concordat frequencies, the same channels the Marauders had used to taunt humanity. He did not boast or threaten. His message was simple and direct. This is Admiral Jeho of Earth's Warfleet to all Concordat worlds. Today, humanity defended itself against an attack by the Marauder swarm. We did not seek this conflict. No. But we did not run from it either. Let this battle serve as a message to anyone who believes Earth is weak or primitive. We are neither. We claim our rightful place among the stars. And we will defend that place against all who challenge us. Transmitted the complete battle recordings along with the message. Full sensor data and tactical logs that showed exactly how the engagement had unfolded. Within hours, those recordings would reach every major civilization in the galaxy. The Concordat Council would see them. The Velion Primarch would see them. Every species that had dismissed humanity as barbaric primitives would see exactly what Earth was capable of when pushed to war. The galaxy, which had slept peacefully for millennia, was about to wake up to a new and terrifying reality. Humanity had arrived, and it had arrived with guns blazing. The recordings of the Battle of Helios Gate spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, in 100 different languages, beings watched in stunned silence as the humans systematically destroyed a fleet that outnumbered them 2-1. Military analysts studied the tactics and found themselves looking at combat doctrines they had thought were ancient history. Civilians who had never worried about war suddenly felt a deep unease. The peaceful galaxy they had known was changing. On Earth, President Wu Jin addressed a united planet. He was a careful politician who had spent months preparing for this moment. But even he seemed overwhelmed by what humanity had accomplished. We did not seek conflict with the galaxy, he said, his voice broadcast to every nation. We sought only recognition and respect. When we were denied both, we chose to build our own future. Today, that future begins. We are no longer confined to our solar system. We are no longer asking for permission to exist among the stars. We are here, and we are staying. The Concordat Council convened an emergency session for the first time in 300 years. Representatives from all member civilizations attended, their faces showing varying degrees of shock, fear, and anger. The chamber that had been so dismissive of humanity 3 years ago now buzzed with urgent debate. The recordings played on the central display, showing the human warfleet's devastating performance again and again. The Velion Primarch stood to speak, its massive form radiating fury. This is exactly what I warned you about. These humans are dangerous, aggressive, and violent. They have built a war machine that threatens the entire galactic order. We must act immediately to contain this threat before it grows beyond our ability to manage. I propose we assemble a peacekeeping fleet and force Earth to disarm. Other voices joined in support. The concept of a species building such a powerful military force offended many council members' sensibilities. The Concordat had maintained peace precisely because no single species possessed overwhelming military power. The careful balance of forces had prevented war for millennia. Humanity's warfleet disrupted that balance in ways that terrified the more cautious civilizations, but other voices counseled restraint. The ancient keepers, a species so old that they remembered the last great galactic war, spoke through their representative. We have seen this pattern before, the keeper said, their voice carrying the weight of thousands of years. A young species emerges with military strength that threatens established powers. The established powers respond with force. The result is always catastrophic. If you attack Earth, you will not contain them. You will unite them behind their military leadership. You will transform a defensive force into a conquering army. Do not make this mistake. The debate raged for days. Meanwhile, Earth prepared for the worst. Ambassador Nari was dispatched to the Concordat outpost with a message of peaceful intent. But President Wu Jin also ordered Admiral Jeho to ready the fleet for a defensive war. The possibility of conflict with the entire Concordat was terrifying. But humanity would not surrender the freedom it had fought to claim. The Velion Primarch ignored the Keeper's warnings. He had spent his entire life believing in the Concordat's superiority. He could not accept that a primitive species had built something that threatened that worldview. He assembled a coalition of willing members and began gathering a massive fleet. 3,000 warships from a dozen different civilizations converged near Valion space. The largest military force mobilized in Concordat history. Their stated goal was peacekeeping and disarmament. Their real goal was to force humanity back into the box where the Primarch believed they belonged. The Armada advanced toward Earth's solar system with overwhelming confidence. The Primarch commanded the fleet personally from his flagship, a vessel that had never seen combat but was built to intimidate. He broadcast demands to Earth: surrender the Warfleet, submit to Concordat authority, accept permanent restrictions on military development. President Wu Zhan's response was brief: no. The two fleets met near Saturn. The human Warfleet positioned between the advancing Armada and Earth. Admiral Jeho stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching the tactical display show the impossible odds. 3,000 ships against 500. On paper, it was a massacre waiting to happen. But Jeho had studied the Concordat forces carefully. They were crews that had never experienced real combat. Commanders who had learned tactics from textbooks, ships designed for show rather than sustained warfare. The human fleet was smaller, but it was hardened by battle and commanded by people who understood that war was not a theoretical exercise. Ambassador made one final attempt at negotiation. Speaking directly to the Primarch via long-range communication, "There's no need for this conflict," she pleaded. "Earth does not threaten the Concordat. We seek only the right to defend ourselves and to exist as equals among the stars. Please, turn your fleet around. Do not force us to fight you." The Primarch's response dripped with condescension. "You have no right to make demands of this council. You are primitives who stumbled upon technology you do not fully understand. You will surrender your fleet, or we will take it from you by force. You have 1 hour to comply." Admiral Jeho received the ultimatum and made his decision. He would not fire first, but he would not surrender either. Instead, he would give the Concordat a demonstration they would never forget. He ordered Dr. Siajin's latest creation brought online, the Nova Lance. A directed energy weapon that humanity had developed in absolute secrecy. The weapon drew power directly from the Indomitable's fusion reactors, channeling it into a focused particle beam of unprecedented intensity. An uninhabited moon orbited nearby, a dead rock that served no purpose. Admiral Jeho targeted it with the Nova Lance and fired. The beam lanced across space, invisible except where it ionized stray particles. When it struck the moon, the result was catastrophic. The moon's surface vaporized instantly, and the beam continued through to the core. For 3 seconds, the weapon fired. When it stopped, the moon was gone, transformed into an expanding cloud of superheated gas and debris. The energy release was visible across the entire solar system. Dr. Hiron, who had been monitoring the Concordat fleet's communications, broadcast a message on all frequencies. That was a demonstration. The moon was uninhabited. No one died. But understand this: the Indomitable alone carries enough firepower to destroy every ship in your fleet. We have 19 more dreadnoughts with similar capabilities. We do not want war with the Concordat, but we will not surrender to threats and ultimatums. Choose your next action carefully. The Concordat fleet held position, shocked into paralysis. The Primarch stared at the expanding debris field where a moon had been moments before. His tactical advisors were frantically recalculating their engagement scenarios, and every simulation now showed catastrophic losses if they pressed the attack. The demonstration had worked. The humans had proven they possessed weapons capable of challenging even the largest fleet, and they had done so without firing a shot in anger. For the first time in his long career, the Primarch felt genuine fear. He had assumed the Battle of Helios Gate was a fluke, that the humans had simply been lucky against poorly organized raiders. Now he understood the truth. The humans had been holding back. They had revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities. If this battle turned into a real shooting war, the Concordat would win through numbers. But the cost would be unthinkable. The Primarch's government made the decision for him. Faced with reports of the Nova Lance and recalculations of potential casualties, the Valion leadership ordered their fleet to withdraw. Other Concordat members quickly followed suit, willing to sacrifice their ships for a conflict that no longer seemed winnable. Within hours, the Great Armada began to disperse, retreating back toward their home territories. Admiral Jiho watched them go without celebration. He understood that this was not truly a victory. The Concordat could return with even larger forces if they chose. But today, they had chosen peace instead of war. That was enough for now. The political aftermath took months to resolve. The Velion Primarch was removed from power, replaced by more moderate leadership. The Concordat Council reconvened with a very different attitude toward Earth. Ambassador Nari returned to negotiate, this time from a position of strength. The terms she secured were everything humanity had originally asked for, and more. Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Concordat as a sovereign power. Humanity retained complete control over its military forces with no restrictions. The quarantine on human expansion was lifted entirely. In exchange, Earth agreed to contribute to Concordat defense and to share certain technologies with member species. It was, by any measure, a diplomatic triumph. Admiral Jiho received an appointment to the Concordat Supreme Military Command, the first human to hold such a position. He accepted reluctantly, understanding that humanity needed voices in the highest levels of galactic government. Commodore Dayon and Commander Hannah became instructors at the newly established Joint Combat Academy, teaching alien officers the tactics and strategies that humans had perfected through necessity. Years passed, and the galaxy adapted to its new reality. Human ships patrolled alongside Concordat vessels, often commanding joint task forces. Former adversaries became allies as they worked together to maintain peace and respond to genuine threats. The Keepers, who had warned against attacking Earth, approached humanity with respect and curiosity, sharing ancient knowledge and forming a friendship that would last for generations. On Earth, monuments rose to honor those who had built the Warfleet and secured humanity's place in the galaxy. The Helios Gate became a memorial site, a reminder of the battle that had changed everything. Children learned in school about the rejection by the Concordat and the determination that had followed. Lessons about standing up for themselves and never accepting limitations imposed by others. Admiral Jiho, now elderly and gray-haired, stood before a new class of cadets at the Strategic Combat Academy. The auditorium held students from a dozen different species, all eager to learn from the man who had commanded Earth's emergence onto the galactic stage. He looked at their young faces and saw the future, a future that was brighter because humanity had refused to be contained. "Let me tell you what I learned during those years," Jiho said, his voice still strong despite his age. "We were dismissed as primitives. We were told we were not ready for the galaxy. We were ordered to stay confined to our own small corner of space. We could have accepted those judgments. We could have waited patiently for permission that might never come. Instead, we chose a different path. We built the fleet. We proved our worth through action rather than words. We earned our place through strength and courage." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But here's the most important lesson. We did not build the fleet to conquer or to seek revenge. We built it to defend our freedom and our dignity. We used our strength not to dominate others, but to secure our right to exist as equals. That is the difference between a warrior and a barbarian. That is why the galaxy respects us now, when they feared us before. Giho looked out at the stars visible through the auditorium's transparent dome. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. It is also dangerous and unforgiving. There will always be those who seek to prey on the weak, those who use power to oppress rather than protect. The Warfleet exists to ensure that humanity will never be among the weak. We will always have the strength to defend ourselves and help defend others. Remember that as you take command of your own ships. Remember why we built this fleet? Remember what we proved to the galaxy and to ourselves. The cadets stood and saluted, their movements synchronized across multiple species. Outside, the combined fleet of humanity and the Concordat maintained its vigil over a galaxy that was more united and more peaceful because Earth had refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose. The emergence of Earth's Warfleet had indeed shaken the galaxy, but in the end, it had made the galaxy stronger.